Hello there, and welcome back to another episode. This is episode 60 of Inside the Vault. I am your host here on this Carolina Panthers podcast, Ryan Smith. And my guest today is an NFL draft analyst and writer for draftprofessor.com and the Right Way Sports Network. You probably saw him on our podcast of Winning the Division with that I host with former tight end Benjamin Troop. He is a Cleveland Browns fan. He is a Notre Dame fan. He somehow lives in Indiana and is still a Browns fan and not a Colts fan, but we won't talk to him about that part. You can follow him on Twitter at Sparks Scouting. It is Mr. Bill Sparks. Bill, how's it going, buddy?
Ryan, it is going good. We are ramping things up towards the NFL Combine next week. Draft season's in full swing. This is like my Christmas this time of year.
Yep.
We get all the measurements together and start actually get in the nitty gritty of some of these prospects. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be here tonight with you to talk some Panthers, talk some Browns, talk some NFL draft, and just kind of have a fun little chat and a fun little night tonight.
Yeah. Let's start with we'll just kind of go in the draft here with our two teams. So Browns sitting there at number two, Panthers sitting there at number eight. Just a little exercise. We can kind of just talk needs and kind of go through prospects as we go, but just gut feeling here. Your team picks first before my team. So, um, with the Browns, you've got a lot of selections here at play, whether the Titans go Cam Ward or Shador Sanders, or they go Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, or
Mhm.
somewhere not those four. So you've
Right.
got a lot of selections here for the Cleveland Browns. But if you were the Browns, and let's just say, for argument's sake, the Titans go with a quarterback, we'll start there. So you have
Right.
Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter on the board. Where would you go?
So the conversation becomes Abdul Carter versus the other quarterback, whoever doesn't go at one. If
Yep,
Cam Ward goes at one, then it's Shadur and vice versa.
right.
I think the question has to become where does Cleveland think they sit in the current ethos of the NFL? Do they think they're closer to a reload status or do they think they're full on tear it down rebuild? And I think they still can be competitive because if they were in full on tear it down, Miles would have already been moved, Enzel would have been moved, and we would see a flurry of moves. And we may still see that with Miles Garrett and his representation in the combine next week. It may be coming.
Yeah.
But I think if you're Cleveland, the easiest way to navigate through the Deshaun Watson era and how to navigate through that whole debacle now at this point with that albatross of a contract is to get a rookie quarterback on a talented, cheap, cost-effective deal. So I, in this scenario, will say they go quarterback. I would say Cleveland would go quarterback at two as well. I would say they would probably, if Cam Ward's off the board, it's Shadur Sanders. If it's Shadur's off the board, it's Cam Ward. I think either one would fit what the Browns are going to do. Shadur probably fits it a little bit better, but Cam has the better arm to deal with the conditions in the AFC North, so you really can't go wrong with either one. But I could also see them going Abdul Carter, a pure talented edge rusher, and my number two overall player on my big board right now
Yeah.
and saying, "Hey, we've got Abdul Carter. We're going to move Miles for a litany of draft capital, and Abdul Carter is going to be the face of the franchise moving into a new era of Browns football."
So then let's say Abdul Carter goes number one to Tennessee, and that leaves both quarterbacks and Travis Hunter on the board for you at two. What do you think the Browns would do then?
So I think in that scenario, I think it's going to be quarterback again.
Still quarterback again. Okay.
I think they'll still go quarterback again. As much as I would love to see Travis Hunter in the orange and brown, I don't think he's going to move the needle for that front office because he plays two positions, so that's already instant
Correct.
value. But he plays two positions in cornerback and wide receiver that are lower on the positional value totem pole. Obviously, at corner they still have Denzel Ward, who's an all-pro level talent. At wide receiver, they could use help,
Right.
but number two overall for a wide receiver isn't the best use of that draft capital. So I think the conversation is between Abdul Carter and one of the two quarterbacks, whoever doesn't go number one.
Well, I'll kind of present myself with a mock draft here for my Panthers here at eight. Let's say, you've got Abdul Carter at number one for Tennessee. Let's say
Mhm.
the Browns get Cam Ward at two. Giants go Travis Hunter.
Yep.
Patriots select offensive lineman, one of those offensive linemen, Will Campbell,
W-
somebody along those lines.
Right.
I'll say Mason Graham goes to Jacksonville because I just know he's more likely not gonna be there at 8, even though I want him to, as you know, on
Yeah.
my previous podcast. Let's say Shador falls to 6 and the Raiders scoop him up very
Mhm.
fast. And let's say Will Johnson goes to the Jets at 7 to pair
Okay.
with Sauce Gardner because they're going to lose free agent in free agency, probably DJ Reed most likely.
Right.
I think it's Jalen Walker at 8 for the Panthers in that scenario, and I'll be honest, unless Mason Graham or maybe a Will Johnson is there at 8 for the Panthers in any other mock scenario that you could give me,
Hmm.
I think Jalen Walker is going to be the pick. I'm more and more convinced of this right now because
Yep.
just some things I've seen and some things I've read. It okay, and feel free to fire back.
Yeah.
Last year there was this weird feeling that Xavier Legette was going to be the pick, and not
Right.
just because he said that the front office liked him and said he would be the pick if he was there. But we also traded up into the first round after having pick 33, which swapped with Buffalo to get that first round 5th-year option.
Hmm.
And then Xavier Legette was there. And it's like, he's got to be it. He's there. And there he
Right.
was. And just, there's so much smoke right now in Jalen Walker. And if you talk to guys like Daniel Jeremiah, guys such as that, he
Mhm.
believes. And Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network, for those who may not be familiar, he is from North Carolina, App State alum. He is someone who's very well respected in the circles of the NFL. He believes personally that uh, Jalen Walker can be a double-digit sack guy. He
Mhm.
believes he can be that guy, kind of that Frankie Louvu type, the Van Ginkel, Andrew Van Ginkel for the Vikings, somebody like that. That his size would not be an issue as a quote unquote pure edge rusher. And so while I would not hate it as a Panthers fan, I also would feel underwhelmed. Does that make sense to you at all?
It does because Jalen Walker's one of those guys. He's kind of some people call him a tweener. I call him more of a hybrid, a
Yeah.
linebacker edge, and when you look at his profile, he's got good length to stack blocks in the run game, very twitched up type of athlete, but he's still learning the game and he's still
Yeah.
kind of growing into his position. So you don't know whether you're going to put him as a linebacker who can rush off the edge as a passer or an edge rusher who can drop back into coverage. It's kind of a fun conversation and exercise to have. And for me on my board, he's my number one overall linebacker because I think his athleticism could be better used in coverage skills and also being able to rush the passer. I wouldn't be opposed to Jalen Walker in Carolina because you could either put him at the edge, put him an outside linebacker and replace Clowney, who's up there in years, put him in the middle and replace Shaq Thompson, who's a free agent. One name that I've heard a little bit more over the past couple of days that I'm surprised to hear, but I'm not surprised to hear Tyler Warren from Penn State, the tight end prospect. And I I don't hate it as much as I think. Yes, you have Jatavian Sanders that you took last year, but if you have Tyler Warren, you can now run more 12 personnel, two tight end sets. And one of the best ways you can help out a young quarterback is to give him a security blanket tight end in Tyler Warren. And, we've seen also success with Tyler Warren being used in a multitude of ways as a running back, a fullback, a wildcat quarterback. He could be the version of the tush push down in Carolina.
Yeah.
So I think the conversation is either Jalen Walker, Tyler Warren, or one of the players that falls, whether it be a Will Johnson, a Mason Graham, even a Travis Hunter, even if he falls
I'm
that
gonna
far.
say it. If Mason Graham is there at 8, the Panthers should run to the podium. That is,
Yes.
and I don't think I'm alone in that. I don't. If he's there at 8, and there's no way Mason Graham, a Will Johnson, and a Travis Hunter, all three of those guys are not making it to 8. So if one of
Right.
those guys is there, I think the Panthers would be crazy not to pounce. In my opinion, no pun intended for the cat and pounce kind of.
No, and you're not wrong in that because the thing is, if Mason Graham gets by pick 5 at Jacksonville, Oakland or Las Vegas isn't going to take him. The Jets could, but
Could.
they already have guys that kind of fit the same role. So I wouldn't see him there if he gets by 5. I would see him falling to 8. And there are, I won't say concerns, but there's conversations about his arm length and that shorter arm length not being able to get as much leverage in pass rush scenarios. He is by far the safest prospect of any prospect in this class, and he's my number 3 overall prospect. And I have a blue chip talent grade on him. So if he were to fall to 8, Carolina immediately wins night 1 of the draft, no questions asked.
So go into that a little bit because I wouldn't be able to do this as you could. Why are people concerned about the short arms? You mentioned that for Basic Graham. It could be anybody that you just happen to say Basic Graham. So why you rate him as your number 3 overall pick?
Mhm.
And some guys, some people, are concerned about those short arms. So what exactly would make him fall? But like what for someone like me who doesn't do this for a living, what does short arms really in retrospect mean, and
Do.
why would it? And yes, I get some people. Yes, some teams have different schemes and how they like to run
Yes.
things. That obviously makes sense. But in the general aspect, if he fits a scheme of a team and these teams just keep passing on him simply because he has short arms, what make
What
it
is
make
that?
sense?
Yeah, so the big thing that short arms affects is it affects two things. It affects your leverage in one-on-one scenarios with offensive linemen. So in the run game, shorter arms means the offensive lineman can push the defensive tackle back, getting more push and taking him out of the run game. But it really affects his pass rush ability. If he has shorter arms, it's going to be create more work for him to get around longer arm guys and get around wide bodies. He's got to be more athletic, and he's also got to be stronger to be able to push through folks. So from what I've heard and talked with folks about, it's from a pass rush concern. They're not so much concerned about his run stuffing ability because he can disengage very easily. It's his pass rush. And it's not that it's bad. It's not that it's a problem. It's that
Right, right.
when you're picking a defensive tackle in the top 10, you want him to be able to rush the passer with little concern. You look at a guy like Derek Brown when he's at Auburn, now in Carolina. You look at guys like, Quinnen Williams and Christian Wilkins and even the Chris Jones of the world that are able to create pressure internally. And when you have those shorter arms, it becomes significantly harder to do that. You have to be able to, you have to have a bigger set of tricks in your tool bag. And he doesn't have that. And it's not that he can't develop it, it's that he'll have to develop that on top of developing a way around that short arm concern.
So, can you think is there a guy in the NFL that comes to mind, and maybe he doesn't, right now who has those shorter arms, who is in a really good situation, and he is, doesn't have to be thriving, but he's a good player in the NFL for this particular team.
Right. So the best one that I can mention is Christian Wilkins,
Okay.
former
Yep.
Dolphin and current Raider. He's just got paid very well. This is a guy last season had you know 5 games, I believe, had 2 sacks. Let me double check that. Yeah, 2 sacks. But before that, he had 9 sacks in Miami. So he's producing, but it's not on an otherworldly level, 22 and a half sacks in 6 years. It's not going to light the world on fire. And that's where you see those shorter arms causing an issue. Because if he has those longer arms, it creates the additional pressure that also allows the edges to get home.
Yep.
So that's that's part of the concern. He is, for me, he's the second best run stuffing defensive tackle in this class. There's one guy that I like a little bit more, but overall, he is the safest prospect in this class in terms of if you take him, he's not going to bust out of the league in 5 years. He's going to sign multiple contracts, but is he going to be an all pro level player with those shorter arms and those pass rush moves? I'm not 100% sold. He is my number 3 overall prospect and a blue chip talent just because of that run stuffing ability.
Yeah.
But do you take a run stuffing defensive tackle in the top 10?
But the Panthers were very bad against the run last year,
Yeah.
Bill. So I would say yes, if he is there. And I mean, I've said it once and I'll say it again. And there are people on my Panther timelines who agree with me. If Derek Brown and Mason Graham are in the same defensive line in Charlotte, families are going to be well taken care of here in Charlotte. I mean,
Yeah.
that it is going to be an absolute mauler to try to run on the Carolina Panthers next year and beyond. And as long as both those guys stay healthy and Mason Graham lives up to his billing, uh, you all of a sudden have, and then you add a free agent defensive lineman, and maybe a Josh Sweat, maybe
Mhm.
somebody like a Milton Williams. You add somebody like that next to DJ Wanham, next to Clowney, all of a sudden you got a pretty formidable defensive line.
Absolutely. And that's if you have a guy who can create pressure internally as one of your defensive tackles, Mason Graham is an excellent fit. It's if you're asking him to be the alpha guy when it comes to pass rush, it's not going to be there in his rookie year. He can eventually develop it, but that's one thing your defensive line coach has to understand if you're taking him five, six, seven, eighth overall is that the first thing you've got to do when you get him in for OTAs and you get him in for training camp and summer camps is let's teach him how to use his length to his advantage and how to develop that skill set.
So, talk to me about just kind of open dialogue here, as we said we were going to do. What are some players that you're looking for Cleveland after that first round draft pick at number two? What are some of the holes that Cleveland's trying to patch up, or we can go back with my Panthers since I'm the since this is the Panther podcast. Whatever you want to do. Like I said, I'm very free flowing with you tonight
Right.
with this
Yeah.
draft conversation.
So it's going to depend. The second pick, which is pick 33 overall, which might as well be a second first round pick, is it.
Yeah.
The conversation becomes where do you go from round one? So if you're going quarterback, you've got to give him some sort of help, whether it's offensive tackle, whether it's wide receiver, whether it's potentially another tight end, considering the amount of 12 personnel that Kevin Stefanski wants to run with two tight ends. I would I would say in this scenario, if we go quarterback at two, offensive tackle has to be the move at pick 33, just because Jack Conklin's injury history has been concerning. DeJuan Jones just had arthroscopic knee surgery to repair an issue that he's had for several years, and he's come in pretty heavy and put some extra weight on those knees. So if you're looking at offensive tackles that could be available at pick 33, you're looking at guys that are probably going to be a little bit off the beaten path. One guy that I would definitely point out would be Ariante Ursary from Minnesota, a true left tackle prospect, 6'5", I believe is what he's at, 6'5", 339, because he measured at the Senior Bowl at, yeah, 6'5", 339, 34-inch arms, 81-inch wingspan. Just devastating power in the run game. This is a guy that he picks people up and moves them out of the way and does it welcomingly, just nasty finisher, plays through the whistle. Good timing and feel, especially when pulling in pass protection. He's very explosive and gets to a spot very quickly. The problem is obviously being 6'6", he plays a little bit too high and stands up too high with his pad level, which is going to cause leverage concerns. Offensive and defensive line, it's low man wins. So obviously, if you're standing up at 6'6", the lower man's going to win. He also can get somewhat aggressive in the run game.
Yeah.
Sometimes he just wants to hit people as hard as he can and not stay within the scheme. So I think ultimately that's why he'd be there at 33. But if you choose not to go that route at offensive line, wide receiver could be another look that you could take a peek at. With Elijah Moore as a free agent, we have significant amount of slot reps open, and a guy I would love to see in Cleveland would be Xavier Restrepo from Miami.
Mm.
A little bit smaller of a guy at 5'10", 200, but he's just a dog in every sense of the word, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Um, but just has really good use of leverage to be able to get open, really crisp routes. He is that guy, that chain mover that quarterbacks love on 3rd and 3. He can get open with ease. The big thing that I'd want to see from him at the combine is what his 10-yard shuttle is going to look like, because I have a feeling he's going to test out as quicker rather than fast.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I would say offensive line like Ariante Ursary, Wyatt Milam from West Virginia is another one. Josh Connerly from Oregon is another talent to look out for. Or wide receiver, you could look at Xavier Restrepo, Jack Besh from TCU, the Senior Bowl standout. Even guys on the other side of the ball as well. If you went, say you went edge, another one you could probably look at would be linebacker. With Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, JOK's neck injury could be a little bit more serious than people are letting on. If he falls to 33, I absolutely love Jihad Campbell from Alabama. Just a
Hmm.
true old school nitty gritty middle linebacker that just loves to hit people and hurt people. Um, I would think at 33, another one that could be in play would be running back, especially whether they re-sign Nick Chubb or not. They need to
Yeah.
get more talent on the running back position.
Yeah. Chubb seems to be hurt a lot for you guys, obviously. And it's kind of like our version of when we traded Christian McCaffrey. It's like guy was hurt so much, and
Mhm.
McCaffrey's coming off another hurt season, obviously now with the 49ers. So yeah, it just seems like he's always hurt and he's always on the pine and can't you got best availability. The best ability is availability, as they say. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the Browns are in a position, and it's a good position and a bad position, that there's really no bad position that they could select with any of their picks because they just need talent everywhere.
correct.
And that's the one biggest drawback that people don't talk about with the Deshaun Watson contract is yes, we gave up all this guaranteed money to sign him, but we also gave up a lot of capital, and you're now feeling that talent drain.
Yeah.
There's a lot of picks. You could probably argue every single position up and down this team, aside from maybe cornerback, would be the only position that I wouldn't look at. But even then, you could look at a day three selection at cornerback, and I wouldn't bat an eyelash at it.
Yeah. Let me tell you about my Panthers really quick. So, we are in the second round. I want to say it's like 60 something or 56. I should have these memorized by now, but I don't. Um, Let me just look this up really quick. Unless you have it right there, I do.
Say looks like pick 57
Okay,
is when you're
I
on.
was close. It was somewhere in that range. Yeah. So based on if we were to go, let's say a Jalen Walker, Mason Graham, somebody like that in round number one.
Mhm.
A couple guys that I'm looking at here in round two for the Panthers, and maybe you can give us some insight here, give our fans some insight. So I'll just rattle off some names, and you kind of tell me kind of what you're thinking based on kind of these players and who they are. Um, we could go safety, a guy like Nick Emarori from South Carolina, if he's still on
Mhm.
the board. Um, though I don't think we're going to go there. You can do cornerback, a guy um, like a Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky, guy like Jaden Barron from Texas. You could go receiver like Emeka Ibuka, Matthew Golden from Texas and Ohio State, respectively, if they're there. Um, you could go you could go edge, someone like a Shamar Turner, Jared Ivey, Landon
Mhm.
Jackson. Those are all different players that could be there at that time. JT Tumuliau, I cannot pronounce tonight, from Ohio State. Jack Sawyer, if he doesn't go in the first round, if he's someone who could slip. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a ton of talent in, like you kind of said the other night with our Winning Division podcast. It seems like after pick, well, I don't know, like 17 or 18 and through like 75, this could
Yep.
be like very the same player that you're getting. And a lot Shamar Stewart's another one that I just thought of off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Who not Walter Nolan, but his teammate Prince. Um,
Prince Uman Mielen.
yeah, if he goes not in the first round, so there are a lot of players for the Panthers that could be available at 56. But I'm gonna say, or 57 rather. But I would say if the Panthers do go defensive end slash linebacker in the first round, I'll say receiver is the next pick or a corner, something like that would be my guess for the Panthers. There's a scenario,
Mhm.
Bill. I could see them going all defense, like Matt Rule's first year in Carolina in 2020, where we started with Derek Brown and they just
Yeah.
went all defense for 7 picks. I could see a scenario where that happens in this draft. If the right guy falls every single round, receiver, they take care of that in free agency. Tight end, same thing if you want to add somebody else. But I could see them just going straight defense in this draft and not bat an eye at all.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree with you. I think Carolina, I think some of the names you mentioned are definitely good talents. The first one I'll break down, Nicky Manwari. I don't think he's going to make it past pick 32. I, I I know CBS Sports released a mock earlier this week where they had him number 5 overall to Jacksonville. I don't
Ooh.
think he is that high. That's a very spicy take, but I do think he's a first round draftable player. He's a second round grade for me, but I could see him going in the first round, especially Seattle at 18. Just because he's a lot like Kyle Hamilton is for the Baltimore Ravens, just an athletic freak in the deep third of the field, very physical, not afraid to mix it up. And I could see Seattle and Mike McDonald wanting to get that version of Kyle Hamilton in the Pacific Northwest. But
Yeah.
I'm with you. I think Carolina, even if they go Jalen Walker in round one, they could still continue to go defense. And a guy I would say for round two, if we're going to look edge, would probably be Kyle Kennard from South
That's
Carolina.
another one that was on my list. Yeah.
Yeah, just a very long-limbed, long-frame guy who's produced at the SEC level, which, we look at traits first, but if I have a guy that's producing, obviously he's doing something very well.
And Bill, they like drafting Gamecocks. I mean, J.C. Horn, Xavier Legette, Jadeveon Clowney was a signing, but not a drafted player. But they love drafting Gamecocks down there in Charlotte. And ironically enough, they still have never drafted a player from Clemson. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. And I mean, even if you've got Kyle Kennard out of South Carolina, you could look at corner, guys that I like a little bit smaller, Kobe Bryant out of Kansas, Quincy Riley from Louisville as well. Azareye'h Thomas from Florida State, just an absolute long-limbed athlete at 6'2" and 190 pounds and knows how to use it in man coverage.
Yeah.
You could look at defensive tackle too. TJ Sanders from South Carolina. If you wanted to really go big next to Derrick Brown, you could go Deonte Walker from Kentucky at
Oh
six
yeah.
6'7", 340 pounds.
Yeah.
Um,
Making my mouth water there.
yeah,
Yeah. It seems like receiver, just looking at this class this year, is very deep, and there's a
yeah,
lot of great receivers in this draft. I mean, the Panthers could use one next to between Jalen Coker, who was a great UDFA find for the Panthers last year, Xavier Legette, Adam Thielen coming back for at least a one more year.
mhm,
They could definitely use another receiver for sure. And assuming, let's say they go there in round two just to break things up with the defense, and a
yeah,
guy like Ted McMillan is long gone, Luther Burden is long gone, um, and let's just say one of the Texas guys goes, I really like Emeka Ibuka. I
mhm,
also think you don't need to go with receiver in the second round if you don't want to. And there's going to be guys there in the third, fourth rounds. And I'll
yeah,
give you a few guys that I like personally. Jalen Royals from Utah State, Jaden Higgins from Iowa State,
yeah,
Tez Johnson from Oregon. I know he's a little undersized, but the guy's very fast. You mentioned Restrepo earlier, and then Alec Omaniar from Stanford. I can't
yep.
pronounce him either. Those are just some of the guys that I like that I know are going to be a little lower round picks.
Yeah, no, I wide receiver it's not star laden like last year's class is, but it's much, much deeper. And if you're looking rounds 2 and 3, there's a lot of guys. Emeka Egbuka, you already talked about, Jack Besh from TCU,
That's another
went
one. Yeah.
down to the Senior Bowl and showed out absolutely, especially after, the death of his brother in the tragic accident in New Orleans. And
Yeah.
nobody would have faulted him for walking away, but he said, not only am I going to show up, I'm going to show out. One name that I would say, actually, I'll give you two names here. Two names that I would say to be on the lookout for. Number one, Pat Bryant from Illinois. Tall, big body, the best vertical receiver in terms of running deep routes, in terms of getting separation deep, in terms of using his speed to get open in this entire class. Kind of like a Michael Pittman Jr.-esque type of receiver. And then the other one, he's fallen a bit off the radar just because he didn't have the season that he should have had. But Isaiah Bond from Texas,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good
he's
one.
he's right at the top of my day three rankings. You know, he's my first fourth round selection because he's ultimately going to test out of his mind at the combine. There's people I've talked with in and around the Texas organization that cover the team, that talk about the team, that write for the team, have said that he could run faster than Worthy did last year, which is mind blowing to me considering he ran a 4.21. So his name is circled on that 40-yard dash line that I want to see what he tests at because if he tests faster than Worthy did, he's going to come back into focus. Obviously, there's concerns with how the ankle injury healed and there's concerns with, him just concentration drop wise, but there's a lot of talent in the middle parts of this draft, and you kind of talked about it a little bit, and we talked about it at winning the division, but from pick probably about 20 to about pick 80, a lot of these guys are going to be similarly graded. So it's going to be who's on the clock and what do they prefer. And the cool part about that is it's going to make for a fun draft night because you're going to hear a bunch of names that you probably normally wouldn't.
Yeah.
And even then, after 80, there's another step down. But then from pick probably 181 or probably pick 81 to probably 101, it's the same thing. A lot of similarly graded guys, another tier there as well. So it's going to be fun to see a lot of different names there. But if the Panthers go receiver, you could even get one on day three. You could get a guy like Nick Nash from San Jose State, who had almost 1,400 yards and was in the finalists for the Bolitnikoff, but he's not being talked about too much because he's 6'3", 195, and he's a converted quarterback, so he's still learning the game and he's a bit raw. But you could get a guy like that. You could get, other guys like Jalen Noel from Iowa State, Jimmy Horn Jr. from Colorado, as well as another guy, Savion Williams from TCU. Some folks like him in that range. I'm a little lower on him, but he's a do-it-all, versatile. You could use him in the backfield, you could use him in the slot, boundary, wherever you want to put him, kind of like a Cordero Patterson-esque receiver.
Yeah. Yeah, from what I liked on tape, or just from what I saw this year, you mentioned Jenny Horn Jr. That's a guy I could see that down in the fifth or sixth round, maybe.
Mhm.
A guy every time I happened to watch Colorado this year, and just happened to watch him flash a little bit, he made some good tape.
Absolutely, yeah. He's a guy that definitely he's going to be on the back end of day three just because he flashes well, but it's just inconsistent. He's kind of that Wes Welker-esque type of receiver, really reliable chain mover slot style. Isn't going to blow the doors off of anybody,
Right, right.
but those are the glue guys that you need on a team, and those are the types of guys that are going to find their way on day three, and we're going to be talking about him in a couple of years. Like, how did he get this far?
Exactly. Do you happen to do you do special teams guys or no?
I do. So I have a couple of special teams guys on my big board. The best kicker is and Andres. I call him Andy Borregales from the
So
University of Miami is the
that's my
best
bold
kicker.
prediction to be a Panther, is that guy.
Yep.
He worked out with Darren Bates at the Shrine Bowl, assistant special teams coach for the Panthers, for a long time. And they
Yes.
had a lot of great chats. And that is my bold prediction, as I think he will be a Panther come sixth round, seventh round, or UDFA. That's who I have the Panthers getting as maybe their new kicker in Charlotte next year.
Yeah, and you look at his stats in Miami. He didn't kick field goals very often because Miami offense was such a powerhouse with Cam
Right.
Ward. But when you asked him to, he was 18 for 19 and only missed one from 40 to 49 yards. But the big thing was he was 62 for 62 on point afters and just automatic. His worst career was his freshman season, and he was still an 81% kicker in his freshman season. So
Yeah.
he's my kicker one. I absolutely like him. Would I be mad if a team spent a sixth or seventh round pick on him? Absolutely not, because I think he's just that talented of a player. And I think he's going to be probably one of maybe one or two kickers that does end up getting drafted. other guys like Ryan Fitzgerald from Florida State and Tyler Loop from Arizona are two other guys to keep an eye out for as well.
Yeah, and then the other one, it would be punter if the Panthers decide to go that route too. If Johnny Hecker does not come back for the Panthers too, that one I could definitely see more of a UDFA route, or maybe a younger veteran guy if they decide not to draft one. So I know that I don't exactly reel in the punter news, but J.K. Scott I know is a free agent from Alabama punter back in the day. Jamie Gillen from the Giants is a free agent. A few guys that are in the slightly younger than Johnny Hecker, but still kind of approaching 30, but a good 5 years younger than Johnny Hecker is. Um,
Right.
who are some of your punters to look out for if there's any for UDFA range or seventh round?
Yeah, so there's one to keep an eye on is Jeremy Crenshaw from
From
Florida.
Florida,
Uh,
yep, yep.
Worked out at the Senior Bowl. 46, almost a 46-yard average on his punts. At 25 ended up in the 20-yard line. Um, hit, in the bowl game versus Tulane, had three punts, 126 yards. Just been very consistent, has a leg. Another guy that I love from South Carolina, it's Kai Krugier.
Yeah, that guy's got a leg, man.
Yes, an absolute just cannon strapped to his leg. His longest was 75 yards this season, and that's not even his longest for his career. It's actually 79 yards 2 years ago. But just an absolute machine. 38% of his punts inside the 20-yard line. So those three or four guys between Borregales, Loop, Kruger, Crenshaw, those would probably be my four specialists that I'd look for at round 6 or 7 on draft night.
Let's go away for just a few minutes from the draft, or we can go for a longer, whatever you want to do. We're kind of, like I said, I'm very free. We're flowing tonight. In advance of the combine, what are some, let's just talk big picture here. So,
Yeah.
what is your best case scenario for the Cleveland Browns next year after this 2025 draft is done? Going into next year, things kind of gel into place. What do you want to see from the Browns next year? What is a realistic goal for the Cleveland Browns next year?
Realistic goal would be a winning record. It doesn't even have to be a playoff berth. Like if they walk
Right.
away with 9 wins, I'm a happy camper. But some sort of improvement is probably the biggest thing. If they go out there and they drop another 5-win season, you're gonna see Stefanski's likely gone, Barry's likely gone. The team gets tore down to the studs, and it's back to another rebuild at that point. But I would be happy if it's competitive football, 9, 10 wins. If they snuck in as the 7 seed, I wouldn't absolutely be mad, even if they got crushed in a playoff game.
Yeah.
But 9 wins would be the optimal season for me.
Yeah. The Panthers are pretty similar. The NFC South is definitely not the AFC North.
Yeah.
So we definitely have that going for us. Um, yeah, I mean, 8, 9 wins, kind of what you said, is the Panthers' realistic goal for me this coming up year. And I think they can do it. I mean, if
Yeah.
Bryce Young plays the way he did down the stretch all of next season,
Mhm.
I mean, people don't want to talk about it, but the Panthers were in both the Kansas City and Philadelphia games right down to the wire and should have beaten at least one of those teams, maybe both. It just,
Yeah.
and the NFL is a small margins league, obviously, but the Panthers were in all of those games down the stretch. And if you combine another good draft class with another good free agency, I think I don't think that Canales and Dan Morgan's chop had to be on the chopping block, even if they were to
Mm-mm.
win like 7 or 8 games and just barely miss the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I think it's progress is the word. Want to see progress. You want to
Yes.
see a sustained improvement. Yes, I think winning 5, 6 games again not where you'd like it to be. But if you can get to 7, 8 wins, if you just barely miss the playoffs due to a tiebreaker or something, I think you can live with that. It would suck, but you could live with that, I think. Whereas if you get to 8, 9 wins and Personally, I think the ceiling next year is 8, 9 wins and try to squeeze out a wild card spot in play.
Absolutely. And you look at the divisions, the NFC, like you said, the NFC South, a little less competitive than the AFC North, but the NFC South, you look at that division, the Saints are in full-blown Saint mode with owing hundreds of millions of dollars in cap and restructuring 35, 36-year-old veterans just to stay compliant. And the Buccaneers, they have Baker Mayfield. They have a few weapons around him and Evans if they re-sign Godwin, but they're getting older. In addition, the loss of Liam Cohen, I think, is going to affect them more than what people are going to want to let on. Is Do I see a drop off for Tampa Bay? Absolutely. I could see them dropping down a game or two in terms of the win-loss column.
Yeah.
But I think the NFC South is probably going to run through Atlanta. But again, we saw Michael Penix at the end of this year kind of come on, kind of catch a little fire, but how he does through his first offseason, coming into this as a starter next year, Atlanta having very little capital in the draft this year. Are they going to be able to put more pieces around Penix? Are they going to be able to get a defense to be able to stop anyone is key.
Yeah, and that's the thing with the Falcons is, I mean, you look at their like defensive talent. I mean, the Panthers at least have J.C. Horn and Derek Brown. I mean, this might be give me your thoughts on this because I'm my bias will be showing here, but
Yeah.
um AJ Terrell is good. He's not J.C. Horn in my
Yeah.
opinion. Maybe I'm wrong on that. And then Grady Jarrett, same thing. He's good, but he's not Derek Brown.
Right. And that's the big thing when I've talked with Falcons fans too. AJ Terrell is a very good corner. Is he a great one? No. Grady Jarrett, he's older in years. Is he a good defensive tackle? Yes, but he's not a great one. Where you get into trouble is when you start paying good players great money. And that's what I think Atlanta it has to have that conversation and saying, Grady Jarrett, I believe, is a free agent, saying, okay, are we going to pay him this exorbitant amount of money? Are we going to move on? Okay, well, we'll move on, but we don't really have the draft capital to replace him. And AJ Terrell, are we going to give him, good money? Are we going to give him great money? I think ultimately, if you are the Panthers, you have a lot to be excited about because the the you look at the conference, you look at the NFC, and you look at every team. Detroit's going to be Detroit. That's just where they're going to be. Philadelphia is going to be Philadelphia. But after that, it's a wide open race.
Yeah, the Panthers have that one game this year against Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco where that could be very blood and guts like Steve Smith back in the day where he just kind of like ran all over us and it was very
Mhm.
bad. That would probably be the one game in which, McCaffrey stays healthy for and he just torches the Panthers for like 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Not 400 yards, 200 yards maybe and 3 touchdowns or something. But yeah, outside of that revenge game against McCaffrey in San Francisco, there's yeah, not a lot of home run hitters in the NFC outside of Detroit and Philadelphia, like you said.
Right. And I think if you're Carolina, you also have to be excited about, you did go 5-12 last year, but you were competitive in every single game. There was not a
After the first
game.
two.
Yeah. After the first two, of course. Once you got your legs under you, you were pretty competitive. But there wasn't a game where, like against Kansas City and Philadelphia, team, lesser teams would have just packed it in and went home and said, "Nope, that's it for us. We're done." But the game against Vegas that you won, the Washington game probably the worst one on the schedule, but even then you were
Yeah.
competitive. It was just Jaden Daniels doing Jaden Daniels things.
Actually, not
But
not in that one. That was the worst one because Marcus Mariota came in. That was Jaden Daniels with the rib injury.
that's right. You are correct. That's right.
So that was what made it feel worse is because Jaden Daniels wasn't even there, but for like the first drive. The one that I think got away from the Panthers was actually Denver. They were competitive in Denver against Bo
Mhm.
Nix, and that may have been the one I think you were maybe thinking of. And then it got away from them a little bit. But that was when we saw Bryce come back in,
Yeah.
granted towards the end, but he I think that was his first step to doing what he did the rest of the season was that Denver game is getting his getting some confidence back, getting out there. I think the one thing we don't talk about enough, and obviously, the Browns, unfortunately for your sake, are not in that situation right now from the quarterback position, but with the Bryce Young thing is I don't think we're talking about enough. He had to stay locked in. He had to stay with it. And it
Hmm.
is so easy, Bill, to just check out. Like
Yeah.
once that happens and you're like, dang, I got benched. This team basically gave up on me. Like I want to go somewhere else where I'm wanted. And
Right.
like it would have been so easy for that to happen. And that's why you saw all the insiders and people like, oh, they're going to trade Bryce, blah, 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 or Bryce isn't long for Charlotte. But Bryce is different. Like he did
Yeah.
not check out once. He and Andy are really good friends. I'm sure you saw the Panthers just re-sign Andy Dalton to a 2-year deal, and that
Yeah.
makes all the sense in the world. And that basically tells you that there's no threat of a quarterback getting re-signed there. This is Bryce's team. They have a very good relationship. He's a mentor. He's another coach in his ear, if you will, so to speak.
Hmm.
Can learn the ropes with him. Bryce and Dalton have that relationship that I don't think if they didn't have that kind of relationship, they wouldn't have re-signed him, but they
Right.
do. And so I just don't think it's being talked about enough just how impressive it is that Bryce, forget the fact that he performed well, but to become back out on the field after that benching, to take it like he did and just being engaged and being there and being a professional, and then coming back out and applying kind of what he learned while he was benching, it says a lot about his character. It says a lot about his upbringing. It says a
Yeah.
lot about himself as a football player. But also, at the end of the day, he was drafted number one overall for a reason. Some people still think CJ Stroud should have been number one. They can have that opinion. Some people,
Hmm.
listening to the Panthers, who are Panther fans, still have that opinion. But at the end of the day, he was drafted number one for a reason. He would have been number two had he not been drafted number one. He would have been drafted in the top two for a reason. And
Right.
he has the talent. He always has had the talent, in my opinion. He is just that 5'10", soaking wet, skinny guy that you got to protect him
Yeah.
well, or he's going to get his head blown off because he's not a big dude.
Exactly. And I think it can't be understated to the effect of what Dave Canales has done for Bryce Young as well, because any other coach in the league would have just benched him, said, "Yep, you're benched, kid. Good luck. Figure it out next week." But Canales stuck with Bryce through the benching and said, "Hey, we're benching you. We're going to give Andy a shot, but this is not the end of the road for you. We want you to go out there. We want you to prove yourself. Stay locked in. Let's meet every week in the quarterback room. Let's go over the film. Let's talk about the tape." Because you see, the Colts went through the same thing with Anthony Richardson. They benched him. Did he lock in a little bit? Yeah, and then he kind of comes back, and then he taps out, and then there's a whole litany of issues behind that. And
Yeah,
you see two different scenarios. So Bryce Young is a quarterback, and I said this when he was a prospect. He is a little bit smaller, but he's a guy you can win with, but not win because of. He's a guy, if everything goes right around him and he's got talent and he's got offensive line protecting him, he can win you a game. But if he doesn't have that, he's not going to be an elevator of talent, and he may develop into that. He wasn't that at Alabama because he wasn't asked to do that at Alabama because he had all world weapons all around him. But I think you're going to start to see more of those guys have success in the NFL because you see the guys like Tua Tagovailoa in Miami and Bryce Young and even Jalen Hurts in the beginning of his career. They put talent around him to help him succeed. The Devonta Smith, the AJ Brown, and they went out and got Saquon Barkley as a run game and an offensive line and then a defense to help him out. You're going to see teams start to say, "Hey, let's build the infrastructure around him first and then get the quarterback after." Or if they've already taken the quarterback at one, saying, "Okay, we got a quarterback, let's start to pump talent everywhere and anywhere that we can."
yeah. Do you think when it comes to the quarterback position, because you made me think of something, we're so hesitant to reward someone that's, I mean, okay, I'm not an Eagles fan. You're not an Eagles fan, but Jalen Hurts did it. He
Hmm.
went out there and did it.
Yeah,
And people, the way he handled himself, he was that guy uh, that got benched, and
yeah,
Tua came in and threw the pass to win the national championship to his future receiver in Philadelphia, Devonta Smith. And he could have gone on to such a tailspin after that, and it could have been dark for him.
yeah.
But he kept going. He transferred, yes, but he kept going, and he came back. He got drafted in the NFL, and he's a Super Bowl champion now. And
Yeah.
so my question to you is this: when you have guys like, everyone knows Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, but is there a guy that sticks out to you? I think NFL.com likes to play this exercise. They want to, who's going to win the Super Bowl, or maybe it's Sports Illustrated, one of those. In the next
Hmm.
5 years, who's going to win the Super Bowl? And they just kind of give their predictions.
Yeah.
So instead of asking that question, is there quarterbacks that stick out to you that are not named, who have not won a Super Bowl? So you can say Joe Burrow, you can say Lamar if you want, you can say
Right.
Josh Allen. Is there quarterbacks that stick out to you that in the next 5 to 6 years are going to get there like Jalen Hurts and actually break down that door, and but aren't seen as the obvious guys that are gonna break that down, and they have to work for it, but they can get there because of their work ethic and how they're wired and the team
Mhm.
around them, like you said, building the pieces around them and making them go.
Yeah, so obviously the easy answers is like the Joe Burrows and things like that. There's two guys that I think are going to get there, and I think that they deserve to get there. The first one's Justin Herbert for the Chargers, just a guy that
Yeah.
locks in consistently, and Harbaugh's done some great things, and I think we're going to finally start to see the fruition of that this season. Another good draft, they're going to lock in, and I could see the Chargers being competitors to the Chiefs. And like I talked about on winning the division, I could see the Chiefs taking a step back next year. And part of that is because of the Chargers taking a step forward.
Right.
The other one is Jared Goff from the Lions, and it can't be understated what he means to that offense and what he means to that team, especially the way he was cast off from Los Angeles. They said, "Hey, we can't do it with you. We're going to go get Stafford, who we can do it with." And then Stafford wins a Super Bowl, and now everyone's saying, did the Lions make the mistake by letting Stafford go, and Goff's not the guy, and maybe we should put in Hendon Hooker and see what he's got. But I think those two guys in Goff and Herbert are probably the next two guys that are gonna, you know, be that Jalen Hurts-esque guy that, not everybody talks about him as being Super Bowl quarterbacks, but they're going to take their team to the next level. They're going to elevate the talent around them, and they're going to take them to just new heights. And it's heights that neither team's really been at before. The Lions obviously never having been to the Super Bowl, and the Chargers, it's been many, many years since they were there, if ever. I don't think they were. I'd have to double check that, but if they have, it's been quite some time. But those two, and then you could look at some of the younger guys. You could look at Jaden Daniels. You could look at Caleb Williams, Drake May, Bo Nix, even as well. Obviously, CJ Stroud. Another guy that I think this year is going to be pivotal for his development, and I want to see how they handle it, is Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love was on this upper echelon rise, and he was on a great rise, but then he kind of just leveled off. And part of that was obviously his skill positions got hurt and he was asked to shoulder more of the load. Was he ready to shoulder more of that load? Not necessarily. But I think those three I'm excited to see this season in terms of how they handle that adversity and how they push their team, especially Goff in Detroit. How does he get the Lions to that next level, that upper echelon? And then, for the Chargers and the Packers, how do they push to that next tier with the Eagles and the Chiefs level of the world?
Yeah. Three guys come up to me, and all those guys that you mentioned are great, and I would have said the same thing. But three guys that you, just to play devil's advocate, the three you did not mention that I'll say, and one of them is actually not because I don't think he's not going, I don't think he will win one. It's more of time might be not on his side in the NFL in
Mhm.
this team. I'll start with him first. where you drafted is does matter. Where you're drafted very much does matter. Outside of 1 year that he made the playoffs, Kyler Murray has been disappointing in Arizona. And I get it. Arizona is not the most run organization, run well,
Yeah.
but he has had people around him at certain parts of his career. This year, you had Marvin Harrison Jr. Come in as a rookie. Obviously, he didn't light the world on fire like everyone thought he would. They're slowly building some pieces, but even that 1 year where they made the playoffs, they started off really hot. They cooled down the stretch and they still made the playoffs, but they got blown out by Matthew Stafford and the Rams. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, Kyler, what is? I don't think Arizona believes they can win a Super Bowl with him. I don't think they're going to say that,
Mm-mm.
but I don't think they believe it.
No, and you can't as much as you want to say, yeah, he's not our guy. With the amount of money that they're paying Kyler, you can't go out there and say, yeah, he's not our guy. But I'm with you. I think he's been disappointing, especially in the way that they got him. You spent the 10th overall pick on Rosen the year earlier, and now you
Right.
say
Yeah.
Rosen's not good enough, but Kyler is. But then Kyler's been better than Rosen. Everybody's been better than Josh Rosen at this point.
Yeah.
But um, he for a number one overall pick, he has not been. He's been average. He's been probably a top 20 quarterback. And when you take a guy number one overall, you expect to get top 10 level play on average. You just
Yeah.
haven't gotten that with him.
And then the other two guys swinging the other way. Can Liam Cohen get Trevor Lawrence there?
Yeah.
Can he do it? I think he can. Trevor Lawrence has the arm. He's got the talent. It's just partly staying healthy and partly also trusting the guys around him and being able to make the plays when needed. And then the other guy with Trevor Lawrence that I put in this bucket, as I almost lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah, and you're gonna laugh at me, is Joe Burrow, and not because of the talent. It's Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
Will we see him be the most famous quarterback that people always bring up in this scenario is Dan Marino. He got to the Super Bowl, he lost,
Yep.
and then he never got back. And the way the Bengals are run, we all know this offseason with T. Higgins looked like they might try to franchise tag him. Jamar Chase getting a deal done. He said he wants Mike Gesicki and Trey Hendrickson back as well, and they want the Bengals to spend better, more money than they've ever spent, and that's just not the way they've done business. And
No.
you can take and yes, they've already kind of changed the way they do business because what they gave Joe Burrow. So what are your thoughts on Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow?
So I'm with you on Trevor Lawrence. I think Liam Cohen, the con ownership, it said, hey, Trevor, something's not working with Trevor Lawrence, because you saw flashes of it, especially during the previous seasons. You see flashes of where he can be really good and really great, but there's a lot of lows in his game, and I think Cohen is going to be responsible for trying to get the most out of him. I mean, when you're paying a guy 55 million a year on average, top three level value, you've got to get something better than what they've gotten. And I think his situation is probably better than some of the other guys, but I'm with you on Joe Burrow. I the Browns fan in me hates to say this, but I do like Joe Burrow as a quarterback. But the way the Bengals organization is run, there's not enough money, and they don't have the cash flow to pay all these contracts. They don't have the cash flow to pay T. Higgins, to redo Chase's extension and pay Trey Hendrickson. They have the cap space. It's just they don't have the cash to put in escrow for these guaranteed money. And I think we history repeats itself, and you look at the last Bengals quarterback to wear number 9 in Carson Palmer, and he had the same conversations that the organization didn't have the cash to put up to be competitive and put talent around him. And eventually he left Cincinnati, didn't do anything else anywhere else. He was an average quarterback, didn't light the world on fire outside of Cincinnati, but I could strongly be convinced that Joe Burrow could finish out his deal in Cincinnati and say, I'm done. I'm gonna go somewhere else that's willing to put money into the team and put money into the talent around me. But Is there a chance he never gets back there? Absolutely. Because we've also seen him have some injuries that have kind of dinged him up a little bit.
Yeah.
The wrist injury's been concerning. When he's there, he's one of the best, probably top five quarterbacks in the NFL, maybe top six, top seven. But, when you have part of your season wiped out because of a wrist injury or because of another injury, you any owner is going to say, well, if you're not healthy 100% of the time, why would I spend all this money for players around you when you're not here to take advantage of it? So I think that's one. Another one that I would also throw into the pot is Dak Prescott as well in Dallas. And I think Dallas fans, obviously, the running joke is, they had all the Super Bowl success in the 90s and they haven't been back since. it, I think Dak is going to be their best chance to get back there, but he's also their worst chance to
Yeah.
get back there because he's good, but he's not good enough to
He's
elevate the talent around him.
as he's a B level quarterback making A level money.
Yes.
That's how I view him essentially. Well, as I said at the top, Bill Sparks has been my guest here on winning, rather, Inside the Vault, rather, almost said winning the division. Episode number 60 here on Inside the Vault, as we kind of talked about the Panthers, the Browns, and then just went into kind of a deep dive on quarterbacks, prospects, all over the place. Bill, it's been an hour. I'm gonna call it there. But before I let you go, what is kind of your theme going into the combine this week coming up? You've got players in this draft. What are you looking for? Kind of going and wait, I know you're going to be at the combine. What are you looking
Yeah.
for? What are fans who are going to be maybe tuning into the combine looking for their future Panthers, for the future Browns, and but and other teams in between? What should they be looking for as the combine happens and the prospects kind of test and do their thing in Indianapolis next week?
Yeah, so the big thing when you're at the combine, some of the big tests you want to look for, and you'll hear pretty frequently, the 40-yard dash gives you an idea of how fast a player is going to run. The bench press gives you an idea how strong a player is. For wide receivers, the gauntlet drills is a big one, shows how quickly they can catch under pressure. Obviously, the quarterbacks that'll throwing against air a little bit, so you're not as, developed in throwing against the defense in a live situation, but
Yeah,
seeing their mechanics because ultimately a lot of the drills are against air, but what you want to see is you want to see a player that's smooth mechanically because if they're smooth against air, they're going to be smooth under pressure, but vice versa, if they don't look smooth, if they look jumbled, if their feet aren't set or their eyes aren't looking in the right place, when everything is calm, when the bullets start flying, it's going to get even worse.
yeah. Um, Last one for you. I
Yeah.
know you're not a Panthers fan, but I'll give you one anyway. Do you have a bold prediction for the Panthers this year that our listeners to this podcast could give, could ride home come next year and kind of going into the offseason with some positive momentum? You already talked about how you like Bryce Young. You like the fact that
Yes.
the Panthers have some positive momentum, obviously heading into this offseason. Is there a bold prediction that you have? It doesn't have to be a win-loss record. It can be anything. It can be literally anything. That you could say, wow, this Carolina Panthers team come into 2025 is going to make some noise, in this particular way. Mine, I'll be sticking with this until I feel differently, is that the Panthers will challenge for that seventh seed next year, the wild card spot in the NFC for the playoffs next year. I don't know what our record's going to be, but I think we're going to challenge for that seventh seed.
Yeah, so I'll give you two.
Okay.
And the first one, I think number one, I think the Panthers will challenge for a playoff spot. And when I say that, it's either going to be the division or it's going to be the seventh seed, but they're going to challenge for a playoff spot. The second one that I could see feasibly happening is I could see Xavier Legette developing into a top 10 receiver in the NFL. With the size profile that he has, with the athletic ability that he has, he does have to work on his hands, which it's significantly improved in his first season. But if by the end of next year people are talking, hey, Xavier Leggett's a top 10 receiver in the NFL, I wouldn't be shocked.
Those are two good predictions, Bill. And another one I'll add to myself, which I did predict this past year. I patted myself on the back here. He missed all of a game and a half when we were already out of the playoff hunt. Uh, and he's going to get paid in about 3 months' time. J.C. Horn is going to be a top seven cornerback in the NFL next year. I'll say, give myself a few spots outside the top five. I'll say
Yeah.
top 7 or 8 corner, and next year he's going to show how good he is, not just staying healthy once again, but he's going to go have some. He's going to continue to rise, and I think people, you talk about Pat Surtain, he's good, but
Hmm.
the Panthers drafted him over Pat Surtain, and he has had trouble staying healthy. Pat Surtain has not, and that's kind of why Pat Surtain had got paid already, and he's kind of been obviously that top 5 corner in the league. He won Defensive Player of the Year this year, as we know.
Yes.
So I think Jason Horn has a chance to be a real factor next year and then the years to come, obviously, as a corner that no one wants to throw against. And you're just going to start discussing him with Derek Stingley's, with the Sauce Gardners, with the Pat Surtains of the world.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. I think JC Horn, I would not be shocked if next year JC Horn did not garner. I would be shocked if he did not garner any defensive player of the year votes. I think he's gearing up if he stays healthy. That's always been the big question with him.
Right.
Even
That's the
back
question.
back to his time at South Carolina, that was always the question was he had the talent, but like you said earlier, the best ability is availability and he just didn't have that. But I think if he stays healthy, I think the sky's the limit for Horn.
Well, we'll let Bill go on his way, but that'll wrap up this episode of Inside the Vault, episode number 60. But Bill, as we head out the door, tell us Panther fans if they want interested in your content for just draft things throughout the year, maybe a common opponent. You might have a write up when we play, a common opponent next year. Where can they find your work and what you're working on now?
Yeah, so you can find all my work on X at Spark Scouting. You can also find my work over at the Right Way Sports Network. That's TWSN.net. I do NFL draft content, but then I also do NFL content as well. So I've got a little bit of both there. But yeah, those two places you'll find a majority of my work.
Awesome. Well, Bill, thanks for coming on Inside the Vault, a Carolina Panthers podcast, and we'll talk to you down the road. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan.
And that'll wrap up episode 60 of Inside the Vault here, a Carolina Panthers podcast. I am your host, Ryan Smith. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we will see you next time.